All right, and we'll get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Ulka Joshi Hansen. I'm Chief Program Officer here at Grantmakers for Education. Really pleased that you could join us today for the third in a series that we've been hosting on Asian American Pacific Islanders. At the end of 2021, with all of the kind of pandemic and the issues going on around the country, the Stewart Foundation very graciously supported us in putting together a series of webinars to help elevate issues related to the AAPI community. We've had two prior webinars, which you can find on our website, and we're going to drop the links into the chat. The first was in September of 2021, funding AAPI communities, setting the context at a pivotal moment, which really gave an overview of the complexity and the breadth of the AAPI community in the United States. We had another one earlier this year, More Than a Monolith, Data Disaggregation as a Pathway to Equity for the AAPI community. And there we really dug into the pros, the challenges of data disaggregation. And today we're incredibly happy to have a wonderful panel with us today. Not on investing in the future of family-school partnerships. The webinar is actually funding Polynesian and Micronesian populations. We've got a wonderful panel, but I will hand it off to Maria Glidden, who is Program Associate for the Harold K.L. Castle Foundation in Hawaii. Thank you so much, Maria, for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Ulka. Aloha mai kako. Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be talking story with these wonderful folks. Full disclosure, I'm not Polynesian or Micronesian, I'm actually Filipino, but have had the opportunity to work in Hawaii along Polynesian and Micronesian communities, families, and youth. And really, I'm just so honored to be here to moderate today and really help center, elevate your voices and really share the perspectives of our panelists. So first, I do want to introduce all of them to you. We have John Jif Acapito, Student Success Coach at the National University in San Diego. And we have Shante Segra Asher, JD, with the Office of Economic Revitalization for the City and County of Honolulu, and also the Hawaii Board of Education, a member. We have Bini Moses Mesubud, Associate Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Eastern Oregon University. And we have Rachel Hoffman, who's an educator in Everett Public Schools in Washington. I would be remiss if I didn't also shout out Joe Enlet, who wasn't able to join us today. He's actually on a plane as we speak, and he's the former Consul General for the Federated States of Micronesia. And we just want to mahalo, thank him for bringing the group together. So we're going to get started because kind of context and personal experience are just so tied into the perspectives that our panelists bring today. We kind of wanted to move through our session together with that in mind. So we'll be asking first each panelist to share about their personal background, about the communities that they serve, and then also about the unique perspective that they bring to the work. So we'll actually start off with John. If you could please tell us about yourself, and then also if you could share a bit more about what folks should know about Micronesia, the diaspora in the US, as well as the Micronesian worldview and culture.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. And again, I'm John Acapito. I am, as Maria said, I work at National University San Diego as a student success coach. I've been with the university for the past 27 years, moved here from the islands by way of the Big Island in Hawaii, Hilo side. So I will be sharing what I know and my take, my perspective on Micronesians in the United States. Just who are they? So let's get started, please. Next slide. So I will be basically sharing about the Micronesians, the background, Micronesians in the United States, and then the Micronesian worldview, some traditional concept of education according to the Micronesians, and then some challenges and opportunities. Next, please. The famous Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu has this aphorism, and which I think is really can be the foundation of the basis of the worldview of the Micronesian people. And it says, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. That's really where we can start to really understand where these Micronesians come from. And let's go over and find out where is Micronesia. My friends, sometimes they ask me about Micronesia, and I tell them, Micronesia is actually as big as the United States. It is as big as the United States, but it's filled with water. In the Pacific, there are 3 subregions. There's Polynesia, Melanesia, and Micronesia. Polynesia, a lot of people think the whole Pacific is Polynesia because Polynesia is more known than the other 2 regions. But Polynesia includes places like Samoa, Tonga, French Polynesia, which has Tahiti and Bora Bora and those famous places. Melanesia includes Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and the other islands there. And then we have this small guy, Micronesia. That's the 3rd subregion. When people talk about Micronesia, they can refer to one of 4 possible references or meanings. There is the geographical Micronesia that includes Kiribati or Kiribati and Nauru. There is what they call the U.S. Micronesia, and that's the freely associated states, which we'll be talking about today. And that also includes the U.S. territory of Guam and the U.S. Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas. And then we have the freely associated states, the FAS, which includes Palau, the Marshall Islands, and the Federated States of Micronesia. And you can see in the map right there, Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia, just so that you know where it is in the world. It is in the world. Next, please. Freely associated states, FAS. So the FAS, again, includes Palau, the Republic of Palau, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and the Federated States of Micronesia. These were formerly called the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, TTPI, along with the CNMI, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. They were entrusted to the United States by the UN as trust territories right after the Second World War. And up to the mid-'80s, they were under the United States. A few years earlier, the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas decided to change status to become a Commonwealth of the US. But the rest in the 80s wanted to be self-governing. And so they established what we call the COFA, the Compact of Free Association with the United States. In 1985, that compact was signed between the Marshall Islands and the MSM and the United States through Public Law 99-239. A year later, in '86, Palau also finalized that agreement with the US. As a result of that compact, the FAS citizens can study, work, and live in the United States indefinitely without a visa. In return, the US has exclusive military rights over these islands, a group of about 1,000 islands in the Pacific. Next, please. And so since the mid-'80s, there is a big influx of FAS citizens, Micronesians in the US. Right now, we have about 94,000 citizens, FAS citizens in the US, including US-born children under 18 who are currently dual citizens. And as you can see on the map right there, the West Coast has the biggest concentrations of Micronesian communities, Washington, Oregon, California, plus Arkansas. And then followed by Oklahoma and Texas. And then we also have, and then after that is Arizona and Missouri, and then Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Iowa, and the other eastern and southern states coming forth. So just so that you know, it gives you an idea of where the concentrations of these communities are located in the United States. Next slide, please. And so just who are these, now that we know where Micronesia is and where these people come from, what are they like? What make them tick or not tick? Or how do we understand them? Well, let's take a look at the Micronesian worldview. The Micronesians are intuitive people, as opposed to the Western analytical type of looking at life and things. Micronesians, they have a correlative non-dual thinking versus the Western dualistic logical reasoning. For the Micronesians, opposites coexist. They are in a reciprocal relationship, whereas for Westerners, the logic of excluded middle, namely true or false, is what they follow. And Micronesians, opposites can be this and that, versus Western this or that. So Micronesians, as you can see, are pretty comfortable with the middle. We go into specifically to some of the core cultural values within that worldview. We have respect is probably one of the most prominent values for the Micronesians. Respect is very, very important. And sometimes it causes challenges for the Micronesians and for the systems here in the United States. For example, in court, or a Micronesian, when they address people in authority or authority figures, they are not supposed to look at people in the face. They look down. Now in court, sometimes Micronesians would not look up to the judge when they answer questions. And so to the judge and prosecutors, that could be a sign of guilt, and that can create problems. So these are some of the differences that has challenges with them. Another value is humility. Micronesians value humility very much. Teamwork is another one. Micronesians love to work together. They believe that's the way to go, working together. Silence is another value, a very interesting one. I think a philosopher once said, silence is the, I don't know, the place for prudence. Yes, it's the, when someone is silent, that means they have the answers. So when you run into a silent Micronesian, be very careful. They know, and they have the power. So anyway, silence is one core cultural value. Collective identity is another one. I am not so much me, John, but I am my parents' son. I'm my father's son, my mom's son. I am the younger sibling of my older siblings. And Micronesians value ambiguity and vagueness, as we can see in the worldview. They are okay with ambiguity. In fact, one of the favorite words in the English language for Micronesians is somewhat. I like that word myself, somewhat. Somewhat is a really good word. It's safe, doesn't create problems, and you can move it back and forth on the spectrum. And that says something about the happy middle that Micronesians adhere to. Then we go to the next slide, which talks about traditional concept of education. Communal for the education for the Micronesians is communal. It's experiential. It's non-institutional, meaning it's part of everyday life. It's not a separate sector or institution. It is embedded in everyday life. The concept of education without borders has been part of Micronesian philosophy of education all along. The ocean, the land are our classroom. Education is also is for its own sake. It's for enrichment, not so much a preparation for the future as it is common in the Western way of thinking. The idea is if you do well today, you will do well tomorrow. And finally, I go to school for my family, my community, not so much for myself. Next, please. Real quick, I know my colleagues will delve into this probably much deeper, but some of the challenges in the education experience of the Micronesians here in the United States, K to 12, obviously LEP, linguistic challenge, is common for immigrants. And the Micronesians are no exception. Another problem or another challenge is that for the younger people, younger Micronesians growing up in the United States, they end up not having, not as versed as they need to be in both their native language or their Micronesian language and the English language. So their fluency level ends up being rudimentary. There's also cultural adjustment, both in education and in the larger community. Non-participation has always been a challenge. And again, that's because of the culture. Micronesians don't take initiative, they wait to be called upon. And that applies in the classroom. Out of respect for the teacher, I wait for the teacher to call upon me. I don't volunteer to answer questions. Absenteeism, again, is obviously a problem. Sometimes a student may miss school because they have to take care of their baby sibling because mom is sick. It's not because they value education any less than other classmates from other groups. It's just that that's as important as education. They're equally important. It's just the way they look at things. In terms of higher education, one major challenge is financial assistance, unaffordable tuition. And because of their status, the Micronesians, at least the Marshallese and the FSMers, are not eligible for loans anymore, like before the compact. And the Pell Grant is the only money they can use for their tuition. And of course, obviously that's not enough to cover college tuition. Another challenge is that some schools, or indeed a lot of schools, a lot of institutions are not that familiar with Micronesia, much less their immigration status and their eligibility to grants and things like that. So that's another challenge for the Micronesian students in the higher ed section. Next one, please. And so we now know some of the challenges, what could be some opportunities, but obviously there's a need for understanding, for dialogue, conversation and collaboration between all parties involved. Community leaders, government leaders, they can come together and address these issues. But the point is to understand where the Micronesians come from, how they think and how they see things, so that we can address issues accordingly and more effectively. There's a need to reach out to, what we can call the weakest link. You see, AAPI is a, what do you call it, ethnic minority. Within AAPI, we have the NHBI, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. And within that, we have the Pacific Islanders. And within the PI, we have Micronesians. So you can see how the Micronesians are a minority of a minority of a minority of a minority. So that's very, very hard to know more about the Micronesians. So that's why they can be considered the weakest link, just like other weakest links in our society today. So there is then this opportunity for JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And with JEDI, we can reach out and work with these weakest links, one of which is the Micronesian community. Micronesians are assets and not liabilities. Next, that's probably a recap. So again, we talk about Micronesia's background. It's one of the 3 subregions in the Pacific. We talked about their status via the agreement, the COFA, Compact of Free Association with the United States. The influx of Micronesians as a result of that. And then the Micronesian worldview, which is different from that of the dominant culture. Micronesians' view on education, which is based on their worldview. And these differences in worldviews and cultural values obviously come with challenges. But with JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, these challenges can be turned into opportunities. Strengthening the weakest links means making our society at large stronger. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. It's so interesting because I think a lot of those values that you shared are also shared by some of those, other island cultures, Polynesia, Melanesia. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind as well, right? Like they may be different cultures, but there's so many similarities as well that are kind of relevant across the board. And also I love the idea of, the sense of belonging coming from the importance of the collective and the greater sense of the community. And I think as we go forward and as other folks share their experience, you'll kind of see that kind of laid out, if you will. So next, I'm going to actually move to Beanie. And for you, please again, tell us about yourself. And we also hope that you might touch a little bit upon some of the issues that this community faces that might be a little more distinct or unique from other BIPOC communities. If you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that.
Ali, can you hear me okay? Good. Well, it's well been good afternoon, and I'm having voice issues, so I really want to apologize ahead of time. And I am from the Palau, which is one of the 3 COFA nations, Compact of Free Association nations. Let me see if water will help. I guess I haven't spoken all day, and so my voice is just kind of starting. So Palau is an island within the Micronesian region and is one of the 3 nations that has a unique Compact of Free Association treaty with the United States. We are located in the southwest corner of the Micronesian region. And I always like to tell people, think about like the Philippines, Australia, Papua New Guinea, and we're kind of in that region. And I come to you from La Grande, Oregon. As mentioned, Maria mentioned that I'm in Eastern Oregon, which is the ceded lands of the Cayuse, Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Nez Perce people. And I'm a sister, a wife, a mother of 4 children, and I'm really thankful to be here because my children's mixed identities are really important part of how I do work to pave a path for their future. In my work, I also volunteer for an organization that has a national component, but also a state component, which is called the COFA Alliance National Network. Actually got involved in this organization through one of the leaders who was part of this space, Joe, who is catching a flight right now. And really the organization started because we saw that there were many barriers that our communities were facing as they migrated to the United States. And so as our respected elder John has already shared a little bit about our backgrounds, I also wanted to share a little bit more specifically to kind of how, we've all in different times have experienced imperialism and colonialism within Polynesian and Micronesian societies. But kind of the difference between how our compact agreement was created is that it was centered around our nuclear legacy, which will be talked about later on during this talk, as well as our strategic military access with the United States. And so one of the things that I also want to talk about in terms of the difference between our cultures is that, for example, Palau and Marshalls have very strong matrilineal societies. And some Polynesian islands have like monarchy systems. Some of us are affiliated with the US, right? And then we have other Polynesian communities like Fiji, that you have to use F1 visas to come to the US, where we don't have to use F1 visas. We actually, because of our compact, have unlimited opportunity to live, work, and stay in the United States. Hawaii is considered a Polynesian island, but Hawaii is a state of the United States. I always want to kind of create that difference. Also, Guam and the Northern Marianas Islands, people there are US citizens, and they also have access to some, but also limited opportunities within their coming to the US. One of the things that I also think about as a Micronesian coming and the differences between or similarities between us and our PI cousins is that we have a wide range of languages, cultures, traditions, and identities. And we also experience our own unique challenges with generational trauma from the impact of colonialization, anxieties felt by our children, being children of first-generation immigrants, but also our children who are trying to figure out their identities as they are navigating through this American life, and imposter syndrome, going through code switching. Because there's a large number of different representations of our people, it creates inaccurate sense of a real understanding of who we are. And sometimes because we're grouped into these categories, we end up fighting for minimal resources. That often puts us in positions where mostly the Micronesian communities are left behind because we often label ourselves as the invisible minority within a minority group. One of the things that as I moved to the US, we know our political affiliation with the US. We know about who we are and why we come here. But we're often met with surprise when there's resistance, there's invalidation, and there's discrimination, specifically when we access or work with agencies that we think should be supporting us, and we assume that they understand our identities and our statuses. But that's not always the case. And so in working with the COFA Alliance National Network in Oregon, recognizing some of those things, we were able to do some work that we hope other people continue to do. Some of the main challenges that we saw our community have is just having a basic ID card or a driver's license. Our communities who are legally able to live in the United States were struggling to get a permanent ID, and that was limiting them from accessing opportunities like applying for a job, getting an apartment, or being able to just get to work. The other thing that we worked on or continue to work on is the accessing healthcare and health insurance, healthcare services and health insurance. Our communities are impacted by many different social determinants of health, and they lack the opportunity to be able to live healthy lives, given the histories. And one of the main reasons why we come here is for education and health. And oftentimes we find that we have no access to those services. And even within education, the aspiration to go to college or to improve yourself is there, but the support system and the resources is not. And oftentimes because of that, we are grouped, or we're seen as international, and there's no support or additional investment in trying to help advocate. So as we self-advocate, and we do that with a lot of trauma, you know, we do that, and a lot of our community members are struggling around how they can self-advocate, because we come from community-minded backgrounds. As John talked about, we have this sense of serving others, whereas when we're here and people are pushing us out, our communities are stuck with wondering how do they navigate through a system and communities that don't want them, because that's the impression we get. I want to share some examples of some of the things that we see with students in education. I work in higher education, and so I often see things where there's a disconnect of understanding from how we show up and then what people and agencies know of us, which is very little to none. One of the big examples that I often see, because there are some very intentional work around recruiting students in colleges for higher education opportunities, where many colleges are actually going to the islands and recruiting students for school. And some of the islands, in fact, all of our COFA nations have community colleges that are US accredited. They're accredited with Western Association of Schools, Commission on Junior Colleges, all US based. But yet when our students come, they get enrolled in remedial courses, or they are put into prerequisite courses, and they end up having to struggle with, not being able to graduate on time and have additional tuition bills. Because a lot of times, as you know, in colleges, remedial courses do not qualify for financial aid funding. Sometimes scholarships, there's limitations in being able to access scholarships. And so our students, and many times they don't know. So one of the first questions a lot of our students, because they know their status, they ask is, do I qualify? And the first kind of question back is, what is your status? And oftentimes the officials don't know when they say, I'm a student from a COFA nation, I'm an FAS student, Freely Associated States is what FAS stands for. And so they say, well, wait, don't do anything, we'll get back to you. And then they never get back, because there's no additional research and investment to find out what that looks like. So students end up not having financial resources, which we know financial resources are some of the most critical reasons why students end up dropping out of colleges. Our students actually qualify for federal aid. Some, I think Micronesia doesn't get work study, but Palau and Marshall Islands receive work study, and all of the islands are qualified for Pell Grant and supplemental grants and some scholarships. But oftentimes when students fill the application and they go in for some of the paperwork they need for validation, they get rejected. And when the students are persistent, they end up having to be reported for disciplinary actions, and oftentimes being labeled as committing fraud. And that also adds again to the trauma, the invalidation, and that lack of sense of belonging. We also have students who do receive funding from outside sources. That funding comes from even the island. And so oftentimes they need to get notary services that validate their enrollment. And they're not able to do that because the forms that are coming from the island that ask the students to fill out and validate is not seen as official forms, because the way it's structured is differently. Sometimes our forms also include who is your family in the island, right? Because we want to make sure there's some of those connections. In some of the work I've been doing with DEI, I've often told my colleagues that as you actively work with our students, listen like you're wrong. Because sometimes we assume that, well, listen like you're wrong and position yourself to realize and learn about what you do not know. And I think one of the things that we also want to one of the things that we also see with our community is barriers that they face in the workforce, the invalidation of their credentials. We see them coming in having really high professional experiences in the islands, but as they migrate here, they only qualify for low-level service industry positions. We have people who are politicians who are working in like Walmart, or people who work in executive positions who can't get jobs because there's a lot of barriers that they're facing.
Bini, just wanted to pause you right here. And I know there's a lot more information that it's super important for you to share. But I did want to allow a little bit of time for other two panelists to speak. But we can come back to this topic for sure, kind of after we've gone through that, if that's okay with you.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. And really, I do appreciate you really pointing out some of the issues and bringing to light, some of those specific issues that they face. I mean, like, it was brought up earlier that being able to travel, live, and work in the US is something that, Micronesian residents are allowed to do, but that does not necessarily mean that once they're here, they get equal access to the resources that they need to live, to thrive, to go to school, and in some cases are really discouraged from doing so. So thanks for sharing kind of that challenge. So we're going to actually turn it over to Rachel to kind of delve a little bit deeper, specifically in the classroom. So if you could please tell us about yourself, and then also from your perspective as an educator, maybe some of the things that folks should know about our students that are in the classroom, that come from these communities.
Thank you, Maria. So I am Rachel Hoffman. I do work as a teacher at the Everett Public Schools in Everett, Washington. I am also a full-time mom to a 9-year-old boy, and I'm a very family-oriented person, as Micronesians are. Outside of my job, I am a community organizer. So I call myself a seasonal community organizer because my teaching job doesn't really allow me much time to put in that work for the community. And I will talk more about that later. I know I don't have a lot of time. I'm going to start off by talking about how I am Marshallese and how well John and Bini both touched on what our COFA citizenship means. It's not really a citizenship, it's like a non-alien status that we have here in the US. So as you may know, the Marshall Islands has a nuclear legacy. The US tested 67 nuclear weapons in the Marshall Islands between 1946 and 1958. And so from that, the US decided to compensate us for the loss of life, health, land, and resources. And having that COFA citizenship was part of that agreement. And so the nuclear testing altered every single part of the Marshallese life in our islands. And that's what makes our relationship with US unique. And every single Micronesian country does have that unique relationship with the US that our panelists here could talk more about if we had more time. And so that said, I just wanted to just start that off by really painting that background that we have here in the US and how difficult that transition was from our islands to here, coming with literally nothing, and then carrying that into our classrooms. So as Bini was saying, there is so much need to really enhance that sense of belonging with our Micronesian students here. And there were some questions about some of the destination states in the chat, and we call them destination states as, another way of saying diaspora. Those states mentioned in the chat box are definitely some of them. Washington State is another destination state. There's a really ginormous Marshallese community here, among many other Micronesian communities. And I know that I do speak on the Marshallese so much because that is where my work lives. And so I want to say that a lot of what I will say does reflect the Micronesian experience. So the destination states like Washington has healthcare resources, employment, education, all of those things that were mentioned earlier before. That's why we decided to come here. And I just wanted to say that given our nuclear legacy, we were given the rights to study, work, live and receive all of the resources that American citizens receive. But then the Personal Responsibility and Work Reconciliation Act in 1996, passed by Clinton, really eliminated all of those health benefits that we were first given. And so for a long time since then, there were 21 efforts, so 21 unsuccessful bills that were passed to introduce, to reinstate our Medicaid eligibility. So that is just giving you one example of how difficult it's been for our communities to receive resources here. Like, we came here for these resources, but still it was so troublesome, and it still is. And I know that I'm just here to answer questions about education, but I cannot pass that. We cannot pass who we are. You know, you have to know our background before you understand the experience of our students in the classroom. And so the experience of the Micronesians really pushed this need for non-government organizations and community groups that our families still rely on for basic needs, for pathways to employment and housing and healthcare. And so that's why all of us panelists are here, and that's why so many voices out there are really pushing for people to know who we are. Our relationship with the US is so unique. And so I just want to thank you all for just being here and listening and taking the time to really get to know us today. So now I'm going to jump into my role as an educator. So I am an elementary school teacher. I was an educator in the Marshall Islands as well. I've been working as an educator for the past 10 years or so. Before that, I was a liaison in the Everett School District. And the reason why I was called on was because, as John mentioned, there's this really high rate of absenteeism and tardyism in our communities. And so they wanted to figure out a creative way to reach out to these families. And so that's how I first got my foot into the door. And so now I love working with the district that I'm in right now. They're very responsive to our Micronesian families and to other families of different minority groups. So at the school that I'm at, there's a really large Marshallese population. And I'm just going to give you one statistic just to show you how low performing our students are right now. So less than 10% last year met ELA and math standards in the SBA test. And this is before our fifth graders were sent off into middle school. And so just given that, you could kind of see the trajectory of, you know, where they're headed in the education journey. And again, this is reflected on the entire Micronesian community. And I think that there are so many other statistics that I could bring up into this meeting. I just don't see that as beneficial. What we really want to do is be creative. We want to see, okay, if the testing is not working out, if our certain structure is not working out for our students, then what will? And so one way that we are responding at my school district is we started this community conversation where we are bringing in people like myself and other community organizers to say, like, hey, what do our families need to be really educated about the education system itself? As you may know, there is a really huge language barrier. And so our families don't even know what services and resources are available to them and their students. And that's a huge problem, especially if it's just one single box that they can check off to receive MLL services, MLL multilingual language services. And I do want to share just a little bit of what the student experience looks like in the classroom. So as John was saying, students do not participate fully, and it's not because they don't want to, it's because the content that is given in the classrooms is typically unrelatable to them. And so then their cognitive load is so much heavier than most students in the classroom. And so we have to be creative in lowering that down. And of course, we need to lower that language barrier in our classrooms, and we need to make content culturally relatable. Every single teacher of Micronesian students need to know this. Administration need to be supportive of it. And again, families need to be more involved. They need to be educated about what kind of resources are available to them for free. The education system today offers so much cushion so that our students can thrive, but when we don't know about them, we cannot even access them. And so I'm going to hand it off to Shanti, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you for that handoff. I will also hand it off to Shanti, but just kind of give context to what Shanti will be sharing about in addition to her personal experience. Is really, she is a member of the Board of Education in Hawaii, which is a unique district in that the Board of Education encompasses all of Hawaii schools, public schools, on all of the islands. And she'll share a little bit more about that. And then also about her perspective regarding what role policy has to play in an effort to better support our students.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for inviting me to share some of my background and also the work that we're doing. To all the viewers, join us as we go to the island of Hawaii, where in December, our weather here is still beautiful. So I am a daughter of Deborah and Sankey. I am from Kusrai and Pohnpei in the country of Micronesia, or Federated States of Micronesia. I have two beautiful daughters. One is in college and the other one is at Kaimuki High School. I want to thank all the panelists for everything that they have shared. I know that I am limited with time, so I'm going to try and rush through my presentation. But like you see on the slide, we are the freely associated states, and there is nothing micro about us. And this is why we need to value the relationships that we have, especially where we play and the role we play in national security. I want to move to this slide because this is a lot of the work that we are trying to build on the ground. Again, in my full-time work, I am a Pacific Islander liaison for the City and County of Honolulu's Office of Economic Revitalization, where our big focus is really in creating better jobs or retaining our community members in the jobs that they have. The challenges that we have with the Pacific Islander community, specifically our Micronesians, and it's really similar and aligned with what our speakers have alluded to earlier. It's really the challenge with our citizenship status and also the access. If we do not know the information and how to get those information and apply, we will not have access to better jobs. So that's really the focus that we're doing, that I'm doing at the Office of Economic Revitalization, really focusing on how can we equip our community members to meet minimum qualifications to get those jobs. And in my Board of Education capacity, it's really working with the schools, because the challenge right now is there is not enough people that can join the workforce because of the barrier of meeting minimum qualifications. That work must start earlier. So a lot of the work that we're doing, city in partnership with the Department of Education and other stakeholders like community organizations that serve our community, is to focus on providing those access, giving the tools for our students to first learn about opportunities that are out there. Second, what do I need to actually get right now so that I can build that pathway, so that job is realistic for me as a Micronesian student. A lot of the teamwork, we're now partnering with Oceanit to do, focusing on what is your gift. As a Micronesian living in Hawaii, the struggle is real. And the barriers are a lot more because for many, we are seen as burden, impact. We are impact to the government system or the society. And when you are born into a community that look at you and define you in that way, there is more that we need to do for our kids so that they know how much they are valued in our system, So these partnership that the city, in collaboration with the Department of Education, in partnership with College of Ed at the UH Manoa, with Chaminade University, all these institutions that will really give us the tools to access better workforce, better opportunities in the workforce. I know that there were a lot that were shared earlier. I gave you this picture. This is a workshop that was done, our office facilitated it, but it created a platform for our pastors, who are really the vessels to our community. These are trusted and respected members of our community. Yes, many of them do not hold a bachelor's degree, but when you talk about community engagement and parental engagement, these people are the vessel. Without the degree, they still manage to bring their community to where you need them to be. So this workshop was really between FEMA and KCC, the Kapiolani Community College, to talk about how do we build resiliency? How can we use and partner with our churches to be ready if there is another natural disasters that happen again, because the pandemic really showed us where the work must be done. And you know, one thing that John alluded to earlier, or the other panelists, people say we don't value education. It is very, very inaccurate. We uprooted from our islands to come to a place that we don't call home, a place that does not offer nature and the flexibility and liberty to live so that our kids can have access to better education. So it is really figuring out those ways to collaborate and partner with trusted members of our community that will get us there. So the work that I am doing at the City and County of Honolulu and sitting on the board, which I want to flag, the strategic plan is what we are working on right now to build for the next 5 years. And our voices, as I represent that community, our voices are now incorporated in our planning strategies. First thing we have to remember as educators or providing education is whether all our kids feel that they belong in that community. So if our kids wake up and look forward to go to school, that is the first thing we have to focus on. We don't need to just focus on test scores. First, we ask if we are providing a good learning environment so that they want to come to school and feel empowered to become someone, and actually also believe that they can become someone. So the strategic plan and the work that the City and County of Honolulu is doing to look at equity and our voice being a part of that policy and decision-making role is really crucial right now. So I am very optimistic. And as they all alluded to earlier, we do need support. We need the partners that are doing work on the ground, need your support to ensure that the unique challenges and unique needs of this community are being addressed so that our kids can really become part of our hope for the future. So that's what I wanted to share right now. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Shante. And you know, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to give you all the opportunity to kind of talk specifically about, you know, I think a lot of the support that's really needed is in resources and access to resources and being able to communicate, you know, like what resources exist for some of the communities. So I wanted to kind of open it up to the group to talk a little bit more about, you know, we are presenting to a group of funders specifically for education. And so what are kind of those areas that you see that are areas of need that need additional support and need to be lifted up further?
I can go ahead. Specifically to the funding, one of the things I saw. Can you hear me? Okay, I can't even. One of the things I saw during COVID-19 is that a lot of our communities are not nonprofit designated. And so, but they are very active in the community and they're using whatever resources they can get. And many of the ones that are actually led by our community, again, are not able to access any of those. They don't fit into the qualifications of what funding requirements look like. And so a lot of times if they don't have the sponsor or they don't even know the sponsor, similar to what Rachel said, we don't know what we don't know. And that's the same kind of thing that we see. A lot of our community members we have one that they do childcare. And during COVID-19, when there were all those resources for childcare agencies who were looking for additional funding while they were closed, they couldn't access any of those funding resources because the way that the requirements were outlined, it completely excluded them from being able to access funding and support. And we didn't know how to be able to do that. Same thing with even basic needs like food. We had to work with other organizations so that we can get culturally responsive food, because mac and cheese and chicken noodle soup was not something that would help somebody feel a sense of home while they were healing.
Right.
And so those would be some of the things I would recommend, is to really look at how we are creating culturally responsive, I guess, for lack of a better word, criteria that could really help broaden the opportunity for people to access support.
Got it. Thank you. And sorry, one last question and maybe like 30 seconds, but just wanted to also just share, because the worldview and the perspective of the Micronesian population is so unique. But I do think that there are broader kind of implications for education as a whole. And maybe kind of how does the approach, or kind of the, how can folks take away kind of what are some of the broader lessons that the education community can take away from how the Micronesian community, these island communities think about education, and what it could mean for all students that we serve?
It's really important to know their stories, get to know the student, and that applies to no matter where you come from. It's really great for educators to know the kids that they are serving, so that they can feel that sense of belonging and be able to share really what they're struggling with.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I know there's a lot more questions. There's some in the webinar chat, and if folks are available, maybe they'll be able to stay for a few minutes. But we're so very thankful for all of you. John, Beanie, Rachel, Shante, thank you so much for being here. We're appreciative of you being vulnerable, sharing all of your stories, sharing, kind of what our students are facing in the community. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you. I'm going to turn it back to Ulka to close us out.
Great. Just adding my thanks to you as panelists, and thank you, Maria, for being a great facilitator. Thank you to those of you who joined us today. We have some upcoming programming, but also want to let you know that the video of this webinar will be available in about a week on our webpage. And then please join us over the next few weeks before we close out 2022. We have an out of school time bi-monthly funder meetup. On December 12th, we have the last in our Future of Education series, Investing in Policy That Transforms Learning. And then on December 15th, Where Do We Go From Here? Anti-Racist Philanthropy in 2023 and Beyond. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of your day.